So sticking to the winning ad formula is the number one most important thing with not only scaling an account through paid ads or paid traffic rather, but not also losing control of the paid traffic, and also not seeing drastic reductions in cost, which is usually when a client will come to us, right? Like the majority of the time, the client will usually say, my ads aren't working as well as they were. And it's usually because whoever's managing those ads, whether it's an agency, a contractor, in-house team, they get away from what was working, right? And that can happen for a variety of reasons. Either an offer can go completely stale, which happens, or we start testing too many things that are just these new ideas that are so far and away from things that work, right? And so I always like to use the 80-20 principle with a lot of things. And so this is also designed, this training today too, to help guide decision making. And that this is for all of us, on this call, even for me myself, because that I run a lot of ads as well. And so focusing on variations of winning ads 80% of the time. So this includes testing new headlines on winning creative. It means testing new headlines in the actual ad setup. It means turning carousels into GIFs with music. It means turning GIFs into carousels. It means taking still images from winning videos and testing single images, maybe with text overlay or without text overlay. If you take just that bit alone, and you think of any of, like, let's use Ralph Christian again, because we're just on the example. Like, you could probably, Tristan and Brian, go create 100 different variations of winning ads that could then speak to other individual pockets of that overall luxury type of audience, right? That luxury buyer. And so when we get too far away from the winning ad formula, when we start testing branded ads with new copy, with new headlines, with that like has never been done before, yeah, no wonder like you see CPA or cost per acquisition 2 times what it was before. And then if you continue to repeat that process, like we've done with Divinity, you start to see a $700 in spend with 8 purchases in phase 2, right? Because we get far away from what was winning and proven and to be true. And so the idea here is micro testing. And this is in business as well, like micro testing at the individual optimization level versus making these big, wide sweeping changes, because that's where, if you need to make big, wide sweeping changes because you're down that path and like nothing truly is working, that's when you want to make a hard pivot, but not when things are working overall. Like you don't want to make hard pivots when things are working. And so that's the first principle of how to win, is sticking to the winning ad formula. Another good example of that is My Lovely Feline, which we just onboarded, right? Like multi 7-figure brand. They've literally run this to doing $2.2 million in sales with one ad, guys. So think about the power of one hero ad, and think about what somebody that was a designer and a developer who had no experience with Facebook ads, who created one good ad and generated $2.2 million in sales with one product, right? So like when we think intentionally about the hook, about the headline, about the creative and what we're doing, it's like we're producing so much creative at times and we're trying to invent all of these new ideas, when in reality, if we just stick to the winning pieces and find ways to make subtle changes to it, you're then, I think Brian and I were talking about that new Shine car ad like a few weeks ago, where the ad is literally still in 4:3 format. They run it on ESPN all the time. It's targeted directly to me and Brian, like 30 plus male, wants to take care of his car, kind of guy. And like that ad is literally, I don't even know, 25 years old. They haven't changed that ad, right? So like you don't want to change your messaging per se. You want to make adjustments to your messaging. You want to make subtle tweaks to the messaging or to the creative itself overall, because then it can look like a new ad. It can sound like a new ad, right? If I say to you guys, like, I'll try to give you a live example. Like, let's say that like we have a fitness program, and the fitness program can do 2 things. You can either lose weight or build muscle, right? But the program never changes. The offer never changes. But like if you only said like, do you want to lose 10 pounds? There's the hook. Versus, do you want to gain 10 pounds of muscle? If you market that to a broad audience in your setup on Facebook, or to the physical fitness interest, which we all know is like 150 million or whatever, like those people are in that audience, right? We overcomplicate the media buying because we don't understand the messaging and making subtle adjustments to the messaging to reach the same audience, right? Yeah, Alfie, go ahead, and then I'll jump into 80/20.
Yeah, I was just gonna say on that, like, I'm obviously learning this as well. It's just like like basically just not being stupid. Right? But it's like, we've spoken about this. It's like it's sometimes hard to do that when you're like, oh, I want to do all these new apps and stuff like that. But it's like one of the things.
Here we go. Sorry, I was trying to click it off.
One of the things, like I've done it with Dragon Beauty in these headline tests and stuff, but it's almost like minor changes can make a huge difference in performance. Like when you were talking about just that example then with like building muscle and like losing weight, like a minor difference that you can make is like rather than do you want to build muscle, or like you could be like, this gets you jacked, and it's like the insinuation with that is that the product is going to be the thing that gets you jacked. You're not going to do work for it, so it's like it adds to that, like the lack of effort with it. But like little changes like that in the headline, like one word almost, and they make like a fucking huge difference.
Yeah, here's a good example of reframing that like you just said. Want to gain 10 pounds of muscle, or want more muscle, so that's a hook, versus get jacked in 30 days. It's the same thing, right? It's literally the same thing, but it's almost more powerful by saying get jacked in 30 days, because the classic direct response headline is get X result from Y product, right? Or mechanism. And so it's just a different way of reshaping the same exact message. That's actually a better example, because maybe, for example, Tristan's already jacked, right? So Tristan doesn't want to get jacked. Tristan actually wants to add 10 pounds of muscle, versus me, like I'm in shape, but like I want to get jacked.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like we both want the same thing, but if I run that message to the same audience, both of us are going to react differently to it.
But right. That's as well where it comes in with like what you're touching on there is like the broadness of the message, or the broadness of the appeal, right? So because it's like there's probably 50 times more people. Like there's 50 times or 100 times more people that will respond to the typical BizOp marketing than the other will respond to the like, let's slug it out for 5 years and build a business that may be like, do you know what I mean? Like,
straight up. Yeah, for sure. Good thoughts on that. And so where this will help is sticking to the 80/20 principle. I know that you guys sort of probably hear this a lot, but in all areas of life or business or, whatever it is. But when you introduce too much variance into your testing, that's when things see these declines, right? Or these hard swings. So a good example of that is like Nick with Chef V, right? He's started to see CPA come down pretty significantly in the last couple of weeks, because we've exclusively almost gone back to only winning ad creatives, right? But making adjustments, maybe testing new headlines, or again, turning carousels into GIFs or vice versa, using winning hooks ready for a reset, right? Like those things work. How can you, like, as media buyers, like I would almost encourage you to go deeper and drill down more on what works than always trying to reinvent. It's so easy to try and reinvent things when, like, if you have a winning hook, what are 15 other ways that I can say that same hook? Or what are 15 different ways that I can show it? Right. And so, yeah, Brian, I'll jump in here on you. If you have to, like I said, if you have to go hard, right? Because for Dragon Beauty is a good example, right? Alfie, like we kind of, slogging along 60 days, slogging along, not really finding much by using branded branded content, right? Like branded ads and branded messaging. And we were finally like, you know what? Screw this. Like, let's go hardcore direct response, right? And we saw results right away, right? Literally almost using the same freaking ad creative and focusing on the headline X result from Y product. And I mean, you saw a 300% reduction in cost per click, right? Like, that's no joke. Like, we'll even look at that with you guys. I know that we've looked at it a little bit, but that's when you don't introduce too much variance into an account. Like, Dragon Beauty was just giving us creative and copy and creative and copy and creative and copy. How do you build a foundation around that? It's like literally impossible. So you have to isolate one element, right? And then start building around it, build around it, build around it, build around it. And this is where the 80-20 principle comes into play too, because when you run completely unproven headlines with unproven hooks, with unproven creative and unproven audiences together, you get shit, right? You get shit results versus like when you focus on the winning ad formula and you focus on not adding too many new unproven ideas or thoughts or things into your creative testing. Now, this is TikTok, Twitter, Google, Facebook, Snapchat, doesn't matter, right? This process applies to any ad channel, YouTube as well. I don't know if I mentioned that one. But, because it's doomed to fail, right? Like, that's what I wrote here in the notes. And then you have no idea with what's working. And I'll pick on you, Alfie, just a little bit, and not in a bad way, but we've talked about this, right? Is that like, we had no idea what was working with Dragon Beauty, right? Because we were just launching so many things that we didn't have anything we could lean on, right? Like, we had no foundation. We had nothing that we could trust. And then you started creating that, right? Like, add 1040 with X headline. Cool. I can work with that, right? Proven audience, proven type of creative now, proven headline. Cool. We can build on that as a team, right? Yeah. So when you stick to that with the 80-20 principle versus like, no, I'm going to go launch branded ads and I'm going to go try this like carousel thing with like this random ass headline that I've never tested before. That's when CPA rises, right? So 80-20 principle, micro testing equals winning. Brian, then Tristan, would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before with us. So hold on. I've said this before with us, but I think it's just reconditioning the thinking, obviously, based on what we're talking about right now. Like, kind of coming into the team here too. Like, I know Alfie probably felt like this, and possibly Nick too, but, initially coming on, and, not pointing any fingers, obviously, to Tristan or his creative team, but we were kind of being fed, all this new creative and copy where, we felt like we needed to test it. And, now just having this open conversation and just, having more of a focus on this is going to help recondition everyone to kind of think like, we don't need necessarily all of this that's coming down the pipeline, not feel pressure to use it either. I know Tristan's like, I don't take it personal if you don't use it. Like, I know he doesn't, but it's like him and his team, they put in the work to get it done. So you feel like you need to test it too. So it's good. It's good just talking about this now and having everyone be on the same page, knowing that like, that's where we need to go with it. Obviously.
Totally. Just one quick thought on that as well to help segue to Tristan too. Like, I don't think Tristan takes any offense to that overall, not to speak for him per se, but like we all have an open environment here. I would say what's interesting is actually hearing you say that is like all four of you guys specifically, like Brian, Tristan, Alfie, Nick specifically, you're all smart, right? But you all bring different experiences, right? You've all almost had to be rogue on your own prior to working within this team, right? So like Brian, you were a director of marketing before and like you just had to get shit done, right? Like you had to figure it out or find a way. Whereas now when we execute within a team environment, like we're leaning on proven systems and processes. So, and I'll give credit to Kevin on this one. He said for years, the idea of like shooting from the hip, right? Like that's media buyer, like 101 is like going rogue. And I'm just going to like keep launching. And eventually I'll find something right? And that's when like traffic campaigns happen. And that's when you launch 15 tests and you're like, man, I've spent a couple grand and like, I need more creative, right? And that's sort of what happens. And so you guys all bring all of those other experiences, and, you could almost think of it as like the process that we've pushed on you guys, like we're imposing it on you, but it's also very much from like a learning perspective of like, trust me, it works, because it's to help eliminate the shooting from the hip stuff. It's to help, because I started, like, Alfie and I are so much alike. I know that you guys kind of know this already, is that like when I was like Alfie, like 10, 12 years ago or whatever, I would just keep doing shit, right? I'd keep inventing, right? And I'd keep inventing, and eventually you find something, right? Because you're a creator. But at the end of the day, when you can eliminate the millions of other possibilities for you to consider and drill it down to a couple of possibilities, that's what this whole process is about, is like, there's a million things for you to consider, but when you eliminate the distractions and focus on the handful of things that you can lean on, this whole entire process gets massively easier, right? And I like all of these things that I share with you guys came from my own pain. Like, I had to teach myself to be disciplined as a fellow media buyer and a marketer, copywriter, and all the things, strategist, because like I didn't want to, because I'm very analytical by nature. So I didn't want to continue to think about the hundreds of different things that could go wrong. And I only wanted to focus on what I knew to be true, because I could make decisions from that I could have confidence in. Right. So I just wanted to help tie that gap together, Tristan, and then Alfie, and then I'll shut up and then we'll move on to number 3.
Yeah, no, I think this is all great feedback, and this is definitely an important conversation to have. It's like when you come into a new company, right? It's the same thing with trusting the process with Monday, right? Like, you come in, you're learning Monday, you're learning a new process. That was really the focus of, I'd say, probably day 30 to 60.
Yeah.
Making sure that I could get all the work done,
mm-hmm.
right? Managing like this amount of clients that I haven't managed before, right? Being in a new role. And I think it's very important to talk about this structure and this process here with the winning ad formula, because initially what I was doing was I was following winning ad concepts, right? Versus the winning ad formula, which actually makes the job a lot more difficult for myself, the designers, and the media buyers.
Yep, for sure.
So if we could go and execute all that, then this should be a breeze.
Yep.
So in terms of the mindset and coming into this, I've already had conversations with the designers about it. We have talked about it a couple times as well on our Thursday calls. We're going to dial back into the winning ad formula here. And even with the copy, now I know when I'm managing Dropkick ads, like, I need to give them more direction on, hey, here's the winning head. And I do this, but
mm-hmm.
I need to be more, firm with it.
Yeah.
Look, this is the winning headline. This is the winning copy. I don't need, a crazy original idea, because then I'm going to have to come back and edit it anyway.
Right.
And also what that is going to do is actually lessen the overall deliverables that we're paying for as a company, because once I get the winning copy, I can just come in, change the headline, change the hook, right?
Yep.
So I want you guys to be confident in that, hey, if I'm going to be putting in a new quote-unquote deliverable or a new quote-unquote creative, that it's going to be adhering to this formula moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Good thoughts on that. Alfie?
Yeah, like I was going to say something else, but just on that last point that Tristan said as well, it's like 80-90% is the scroll stopper, it's the image, the headline, and the hook. Like, that's like most of the ad, right? Like, that's 90% of success is just there in that, like what you see. Another thing I was going to say is, like, we're talking about processes. It's like, I would it was funny just listening to it because it's 100% true. If I would describe, it's like, with all these processes, the way I used to operate would be like, you'd be given an assignment to assassinate someone, and then you'd run in and like kill like 50 people, and it'd be like this mad thing. Whereas now it's like,
snipe.
You're just a sniper, and it's like, oh yeah, and you kind of like at the start, like, but do we not meant like? There's no way it could be that simple. Like, surely you've got to go and do all this, and then it's like, no, you just do this.
Right,
Like,
exactly. Is it really that simple?
Yep.
Yeah, it's like
That's a good.
And you know what, to affirm that, because we've looked at some accounts before together, right? Ralph Christian's a good one. And then if you guys remember the Olive and Sage brand that we looked at together, so I still to this day, when I see some of the most simple things that are like driving multi-million dollars in sales from ads, I'm like, I want to punch myself in the face sometimes because it refers to that sniper mentality versus spray and pray, right? Like, do you want to, I know we're recording this, but do you want to be the guy with the AK on the ground, spray and pray? Or do you want to be the guy up top, that is, sniping his target, right? Like, I want to be the sniper. I don't know about you.
yeah.
So yeah, good example there.
Depends on the day.
What's that?
Said it depends on the day.
Depends on the day. True. Sometimes you just got to mow them down, and that happens.
Sometimes you get in that mindset though. You get used to like everything I had done. Like you're talking about where we'd come from to sort of come into the team. Everything I had done previously was all based on I'm gonna run in there and like do crazy shit and
Yeah.
do fucking marketing gymnastics and stuff like that.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
Yep.
Me too. I'm not used to having the processes and the
Yep.
structure. So it's really good. Man. Really
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are. I know that Kevin and I talk a lot about process with you guys, and I don't know if it's like even nauseating for you at some points. And I'll just assume that maybe sometimes that it is. But if you're a fan of the Prophet, so Marcus Lemonis, he always talks about people, product, and process. And so no matter where you guys want to go in life and business, etc., whether it's professionally, like if you're wealth driven or financially driven, like it's going to come through people, product, and process. And so today, we've got this great group of people, the 6 of us on this call. We have refinement to the product that we're making through process. And the only way that we get there is through process, right? And so I know that it's like not a sexy thing to talk about, but it truly, like, winning in whatever area that it is comes from process. So the next piece that I want to touch on with winning principles is add variable isolation. I know that I haven't really sort of pushed this philosophy with you guys so much, but I've sort of defined it for myself, probably like 8 months ago, of what exactly this process is with creative testing. Is if you guys think back to, like when we were in school and, scientific experiments, your science teacher would always talk about, you need a control in your science experiment, and then you need a variable, right? And so when we talk about the example that we talked about before, if you have 10 different variables in your experiment, what the hell do you think your results are going to look like, right? That Petri dish is going to be like a mishmash of bacteria and mold and like, there's nothing that you can sort through there, right? So when you use add variable isolation, and I'll explain this, remember we're testing one variable at a time. So if we have one creative, that creative is the control. And then if you're testing 3 different headlines, those are the variables. So technically you do have 2 variables within the setup of the creative and the headline, but within the setup itself, because you're controlling all of the setup, for certain that like this creative and this headline are winning pieces versus any other piece in the test. And so when we test other unproven creatives together with unproven copy and unproven headlines, it's going to be incredibly difficult to build off of that foundation, right? So at its very minute level, it's something like add 10001 with headline ABC, right? So that when you run that test, for certain this is a winning headline, this is a winning message, this is a winning hook, right? But when you have an ad set with 3 different creatives, with 3 different copies and 3 different headlines, you actually have 9 variables. And it goes against like the true, I don't even know what the right word is to use, like the true dynamics of a controlled scientific experiment. And though we're running ads, like it's a scientific experiment, right? Like we're trying to get data from this test that we're running. And if we have too many things to consider, then like that's when your mind just wants to explode, because you're like, you don't have any confidence in what you're seeing, right? And so I know that this idea of ad variable isolation is somewhat of a newer idea to you guys, but this whole philosophy and this process that we've been touching on is rooted directly in this. So like when we were looking at our potential phase 0 messaging testing that we were talking about last week, ad variable isolation, right? You have control within the setup of your scientific experiment, and you're able to specifically identify the winning piece to the scientific experiment, which is then going to be either the copy or the headline itself. And so, you know,
I just wanted to ask
yep.
what Nick's thoughts on ad variable isolation were. What's your thoughts on that, boss? I mean, I'm just curious.
What do you mean specifically?
Like, so with this ad variable isolation process, is this something that is new that we're rolling out, or is this something that we've been doing in our accounts currently?
I mean, we've been doing it, yeah. I mean, for example, I mean, I don't think we're super like precise with it.
Yeah.
For example, if we're testing copy, right, then we would not necessarily going to use the same copy with the same headline. Sometimes we'll like have a new headline with a new copy. So then you're testing two variables at a time, right?
Okay.
But,
And I think, you know, obviously now that we're having this conversation about, you know, winning ad formula, ad variable isolation, you know, you got the phase 2 winning ad for GBO right now, testing different headlines. I think we're really just going to start dialing more in on that. And then also you guys might see in your dossiers, like, same copy, just different hook, different headline.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
All right, cool, man.
Yep.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah. So Nick is right. Like we've been using ad variable isolation overall, but I would say I haven't done a good enough job of explaining to you guys why or exactly what that philosophy is rooted in. And so today, this is sort of like a new starting point, if you will, of seeing how that, you know, would work overall. Next piece to how to win with creative testing overall is use your best audience consistently. You know, again, this is all rooted again towards that 80-20 principle and minimizing variance. So I would say Nick does a really good job of this. Like he consistently always goes back to the same audience. So like for Chef V, for example, immune system is a large targetable interest that we use quite a bit for the health space. And so he consistently always uses the same audience every time. And it's good to do that because you don't want to wonder for yourself whether, like, if you're testing multiple different audiences, like, well, is it the audience or is it actually my headline, my creative, my copy, or my hook, right? So like you want to continue to eliminate the decisions or the pieces to the experiment that could go wrong. And so if we follow this process the way that it was designed and intended, is that audiences should almost never be like the thing that goes stale, right? The only thing that will ever go stale with an audience is the angle of your messaging, right? Which means that's why you continue to go down the path of testing headlines and repositioning the hook, because you don't need to necessarily change the creative. You could make a slight adjustment to that creative, and then with a slight adjustment to the hook, that's a completely new ad, air quotes, to the immune system audience, for example, right? And that's where like continuing to use that best audience only will minimize the audience as a variable. And if the test isn't working, it's either the creative, the headline. That's actually supposed to say the hook. I mistyped that. Or the hook, right? So again, it just sort of drills into, you know, control versus, you know, variance when we're testing overall. Yeah, go ahead, Tristan.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. When you say audience, are you talking about like the specific audience that like the interest that they're targeting?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, from more of a messaging or copy or creative perspective, it's sticking to the same avatar per se. Smart for Life could be a good example of this, right? So when you go throw pumpkin spice out there, could potentially be a completely different audience, right? Like Alfie's still able to run the ads to similar audiences within the ad platform itself from an actual targeting perspective. But what any of us,
I would need to hold Brian accountable in as well. Like, hey, if you're going to be bringing forth these new products, this could be going towards a completely different like avatar.
Yep.
Actually.
Yep. Exactly.
Versus just audience.
Yep.
Well, I mean, in this case, it worked, but like.
Yeah, for sure. And it did work, but that's a good example of, or here's actually an even better example, like where Smart for Life started versus where we are now. When we started with them, they wanted to market these like weight loss kits, right? And now we're marketing this like gourmet protein bar that is a completely different avatar. Like we created that avatar. That avatar never existed for that brand. Right. So like when you think of that, like different products are hooks in and of themselves too. Right. Yeah. And they will attract a different avatar.
And like on the Thursday calls, I'm just going to be asking you guys just to give more clarity on what you guys are seeing. Like what are the actual interests, right? Or the audiences, I guess is the right term, that are working best, and just getting more clear on that and the avatars moving forward. So we don't, we just stay in that direction, right?
Correct.
I think on that, Tristan, like with Brian is like, Brian loves to change things. Like he just loves changing stuff. Like I saw, Jack sent me this thing. I've got a call with him later on tonight, and it's
I noticed that.
Yeah, and it's like he's got like 5 bullet points of like what we want to see in Facebook, which is like, and he's got this stuff of like you need to use these audiences. You should be, and it's like. With Brian, you almost
it's kind of like Tristan giving you guys
grain of salt.
Creative ideas.
and that's where like it's a good awareness for you guys on how to consult back, right? Consulting back. Yeah, consulting back and saying like keeping people within sort of the boundaries of things too, right? Like this is what could happen if you do this. This is what could go wrong. This is what could go right. My job is to coach you through that process of saying, here's what could go wrong. Here's what could go right. But and that's where those individual situations are important because even brand decisions can stray us off track too, right? And so you guys being aware of it, nope, winning ad formula. I'm willing to go test this for you, but here's what could happen. Like, our philosophy is that 80% of everything that we do sticks to the winning offer, the winning funnel, the winning messaging, the winning creative, etc. I'm good to go test this. If it does not work, your cost per acquisition will rise, and then I recommend killing it. Right? Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, hop in real quick. That's where I think Alfie, you and Tristan, or any media buyer and Tristan being on the same page, super important, and never agreeing is a direction on a call without looping each other in, right?
Yeah.
If I'm ever on a call by myself, sure, like I'm at the top so I can make the decision and delegate down. But like Alfie, like if you're on a call and Brian's like left field, you're like, oh, like that's interesting. Like let me get back with the team to agree on the best direction to choose. Because I can tell you firsthand experience of like when I first joined Will years ago, I would get feedback from client and then go pivot and he's like, no, like, and then it's like, oh crap. Just listening to them, because you have to realize where they're coming from too, right? Brian now has to answer to somebody above him, and he's trying to show worth, so he's trying to come up with ideas to make sure that, oh, hey, this is me. So always consider where the person's coming from, and then they also don't know where they're going. So if you're just getting a bunch of random ideas, maybe they don't know where they're going, and so reinforce, hey, we can't do this because we're going here.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's really good, and really what it is, especially if people have pressure from above, and I mean I'm pretty sure we're all guilty of this, is I want to cover my ass, so I'm going to make sure I have all these creative ideas to present to the higher ups.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're doing with these different headlines based on this data,
right?
So coaching them on the data as well, and I'm not in the data, right? So that's going to be more on you guys.
Yeah,
I am going to be learning more of the soft stats and stuff like that to be able to get more into that. But just dialing in, and that's the detail quadrant, right? Like dialing in on the detail, and this is why we're making these decisions because of X data.
Yep. So just a tiny, simple like drawing that I put on the document here. Like our goal is to keep our partners, the people we're running traffic for, etc., focused on point B, right? Like our job is to take them from point A to point B. They've said that they want us to take them to point B. When those things don't happen, right, it looks like a roller coaster, or like you go backwards and then you go up and then you go down, you might go left and then you go right, and maybe you'll arrive at point B. And so that's what Kevin was saying is like, when we go off track, and this is winning ad formula, this is testing new offers and random things and all of that, it actually sets the arrival at the destination back, right? So it's being willing to coach from a point of, hey, our goal is getting to point B. I'm willing to explore these other new ideas and things like that for you. But if point B, the path to point B is working, we're sure as hell going to stay on the path to point B, right? And then if you want to explore other ideas, like we're always down to innovate, it's also smart to continue testing other offers and things like that. But if it steers us off track, this is as a media buyer as well as a consultant. Like Tristan's a consultant in this scenario. Kevin's a consultant in this scenario. You guys do consult as well and also, do ops, right? And so in those scenarios, it's being like, no, I need to do this because I have a process and I know that this process works. And you told me that you want B result and I'm going to take you to B. Right? So just a very simple way of like illustrating that, overall is that you don't want this line to be squiggly and backwards and have peaks and valleys and all the things, like as little as possible, at least anyways.
Right. And it's also, it also prevents.
It's hard to what?
What'd you say, Kev?
I said, yeah, because the line's already going to be squiggly. So
yeah.
It's just, you got to try to keep it as flat as possible.
Yep.
And that's also a main reason. That's one of our main jobs is like instilling confidence in the client, giving them more clarity, clearing out the ambiguity, right? Like, look, this is the process. This is what we know works. This is what we're doing and why.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's just like down to being strong-willed, isn't it? It's like that's one of the things
like
that
Will on that last call with Smart for Life.
In the past couple of weeks, it's just like if you like on this whole thing, like what Brian mentioned it earlier, is like when you kind of have an idea of like, well, you have an idea of how the things should proceed, and then for whatever reason, like a client may give you something, and you're like, it's almost like a test of like weakness, right? It's like, do I sort of save myself rather than doing what I actually think's best? But I don't know. I feel like if this was my business, what would I do? Then you're probably going to make a better decision, right?
Yep.
Like rather than just putting out stuff that maybe you're not confident in.
Yeah, totally.
For ages.
It's a lot easier to do when it's not your money too.
Oh yeah. Wait until the one day that you guys get to spend your own money.
Yeah.
It changes things for you, I'll tell you that. So next one. So kill ad sets early. I think this is a point of emphasis that I've really noticed lately from, some of our check-ins and things, is that like, if you see a creative that is just not down the right path, I really want to strongly ask you to please kill it early. Oh, and I'll give you just sort of like a hypothetical example. Let's say that the CPC account average historically is $1. It's easy numbers. But this creative that we're testing is coming in with a CPC of $250. Like, you have to understand that ad will never back out at scale, right? Our entire job is to scale the brand, scale the spend, scale the revenue. And so if you have an inefficient ad in testing, there's no way that it can produce a low CPA or a high ROI when you're spending thousands of dollars a day on that campaign that you will eventually move that ad to, right? And so what I want to prevent and what we need to get better at is we need to get better at recognizing our soft stats and looking at all of our data, the CPM, the CPC, the unique click-through rate, the conversion rate, and what the result of all of that is, which is the CPA. For years, I've only seen media buyers who make decisions off ROAS and CPA only, and then they wonder why they can't scale an account. The reason for that is we can all get cheap conversions at $25 a day. But what's really hard is maintaining CPA at $2,000, $3,000 a day, right? Significantly different. That's what separates like sort of like the button pushers from the big boys, right? Is that like when you can maintain CPA, when you're spending 10, 11 grand a day, that's when you know that you have control over your media buying process. That's when you know that you have control over your data and what you're seeing and the decisions that you're making. And so, for example, if the creative, see, one thing that I think, because I see it in ad leaks all the time, like I see the questions, oh, my CPM's gone up, my CPM's gone up. It's like, bro, it's simple, my guy. Like your creative is not resonating with the audience, right? And so the result of that is going to be most often a high CPC and a low CTR. And that ad will never work at scale because our goal is to scale. We're not day trading and spending $100 a day here like the majority of our media buying community. Like our job is helping this brand go from 100 grand a month in sales to 500 grand a month in sales, right? And that's a different mindset. That's a different approach. And so the reason that I bring up kill ad sets early is like, if you don't, this is when spend gets wasted, right? This is when CPA at the campaign level gets high, right? When we say to clients, oh, don't look at the campaign level, what we're really trying to tell them is my creative tests are shit, right? The best phase 2 campaigns are ones that also are really damn close to target CPA. And the reason for that is when you stick to the winning ad formula, you produce more consistent results more often, right? And so what you want to do and what we need to do is kill underperforming creative tests faster. And the rule of thumb that I want to like strategically put in place for all of us is if the ad set has spent 2 times the average CPA without any purchases, do not run that creative any longer. It's either the creative, the copy, or the headline that is just not resonating with the audience. But remember, this will reduce overall waste of spend. And it will also, when you look at your 30-day look back of an account, this is when you can keep control of cost per acquisition more consistently because you're not letting stuff run too long. So Brian, you wanted to jump in on that?
I think Tristan was first.
Tristan was first. Go ahead, Tristan.
No, I was just going to ask, does that negatively affect the pixel? Or how does that affect the pixel?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really say that. It's a good question. I've definitely heard that question before, but if you continue to, the counterpoint to that would be, or the counter thought would be, if you continue to fuel the pixel with good stuff, you don't have anything to worry about. If you continue to fuel the pixel with bad stuff, then you probably have something to worry about. So don't launch stuff that's not close to being proven. Then you won't have to ask that question. And I don't mean that in a mean way, right? But if you continue to train the pixel from the perspective of winning stuff, then you don't have to worry about killing stuff too early. Because that's...
And so like, let's say, and I'll let Brian speak here after this. Like, let's say when you say turn off an ad or turn off a creative.
Yep.
Dialing into this process, that's probably going to be a variant in phase 2, if we're talking about phase 2,
right,
of what is already working.
Right.
So when you say turn off the creative, you're talking about turn off the ad in the ad set itself.
No, I'm talking about kill the actual entire creative test overall, because there's a little bit, I understand the question. There's a little bit of like gray area.
Is it the variant that's not working?
The variant.
The variant's going, or is it like...
Yeah, so let's define it like this. Let's say that you have a winning video 1001, and then you give me 4 different headlines on that 1001, and now that new creative test is 1002. Let's just say for whatever reason those 4 headlines that you gave me are just not working. Right? I want to kill the entire 1002 test, not all of the individual variants, because if I can't produce the conversion with sticking to it, then it's probably not going to work, and I should move on to the next round of 4 headlines. You know what I mean? Because the downside is that if you let each one of those individual ads spend, let's say target CPA is $50 and you gave me 4 headlines, that creative test would have to spend $400. If I produce no results on any of those tests, I've now spent $400 or 4 times the amount that I would prefer to spend, which is $100. And I'd rather just move on to the next winning variable test than to keep spending stuff. Yeah.
When you say that, you're saying in reference to all 4 different headlines.
Correct.
All right. As long as the media buyers get that, I mean, I'm not going to be doing that.
Right. Yeah, that's a media buyer, like sort of or execution point. Yeah. Exactly, Brian.
I was just going to say in here, just so everyone can kind of see it, as a sub bullet on for 5 or something. Just put your suggested rule in here.
Yeah, that's a good idea
to use.
Yeah. I think did I write that? I think I was starting to write it and then I forgot. Yeah, good suggestion there. So the suggested rule is going to be if spend is greater than, you're going to have to do this account by account, of course.
Right.
2 times cost per purchase. You're going to have to do that math. If it's 50, then you would set it at 100. And purchases is less than 1 equals turn off. So that's the rule that you would want to use here. Go ahead.
I think an important thing to add on the rules is like including both offline and website purchases. That's something I do, because if it picks up an offline purchase, but you've only put it as like under 1 website purchase, that rule won't apply.
Yeah, if you use the purchase, I don't even know what to call this, element definition, it should include website and offline.
Oh, I'm putting it separately, like offline and website. But
website conversion from the pixel should cover both of them.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Because we're using Zapier and offline conversions from Shopify data to push it back to the ad account, that would cover it. I can't speak to maybe any other account that you might be running on your own as well. But if you're pushing offline conversions into the account, then purchases would cover that.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, good suggestion there, Brian. And then I've got 3 more, and I'll keep these a little bit shorter. So number 6, I think if there's anything that we've learned today, testing more headlines on winning ads and keep great ads going. I mean, pretty straightforward, right? Like, for example, we have like ad 10002, for example, for Chef V. Like, we could go test 15 different headlines on that video and keep that great ad going. We've got My Lovely Feline that we just onboarded, right? Did 2.2 million with 1 video. With basically 2 different headlines. We could go create 15 different headlines and 15 different thumbnails for that video that make that video look like a new ad that speaks to a different portion of the cat lovers audience, if you will, that can allow us to keep that winning creative going, while we also test 20% of the time new ideas, right? So if 80% of the time, we're focusing on variations of a winning ad or winning ad concepts, then, we can be testing 20% of the time, new things. So that one's pretty straightforward. Test more headlines on winning ads. And that's going to be on the creative itself, as well as within the actual ad setup, so very just straightforward. Number seven is going to be prioritizing the hook. This also comes from a little bit of experience as well, but then I know that we've been of experience of working with other media buyers, is that a lot of media buyers don't give credit to the actual ad copy. Like, they think that it's all about the creative, right? They think that it's all about the image or the video. Well, Alfie just changed, even though he's a copywriter as well by trade, his own belief level changed significantly through his own testing in the last couple of weeks by prioritizing the hook, right? And so I wanted to give him credit for that, because, no one will read your ad if the hook sucks, right? And so the hook is the first line of copy. And if we don't intentionally think about that hook, our CPC is going to be high, our CPM is going to be high, and our cost per acquisition is going to be high. So as media buyers, like we control our setup. Like Tristan and the creative team can give us the creative, but it's up to us to maximize that real estate. I want you guys to think of it as like billboards on a highway, right? Like maximize the 4 to 5 different pieces of real estate that you have, because every one of those 5 is an opportunity to get the click, which is an opportunity to reduce the cost per acquisition. So when I talk about the real estate, I mean the first line of ad copy. I mean the headline in the creative, that's number 2. I mean the actual creative itself, that's number 3. The actual headline in the setup, that's number 4. And the actual link description, which is also a headline, which is number 5, right? All of those are 5 opportunities for call. Well, and then really you have 6 because the actual call to action button, if you want to throw that in there too. So like there's 6 opportunities there to earn the click, right? And so if we have high CPC, it's because we're simply not earning the click. Like our hook is not strong enough to get the interest that we need to drive them through to the landing page. So if we have accounts that have $4 CPCs or $5 CPCs or more, again, Alfie just proved that. Like he was running, branded ads for a beauty brand and then went native with the ads, changed the ad copy in the headline and dropped CPC from $6 to $2. 300% reduction in CPC, right? Which then means that he's now getting anywhere from a $30 to $50 cost per acquisition where he had $200 plus before, right? Just by prioritizing the hook. Go ahead, Alfie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was looking at this last night. Some cool ways to like find headline, almost like ad headline templates for us. It's just like looking at like magazine covers.
Yep.
There's like they're all of those are like short little bullets that like little demand triggers that obviously are tested by like the best copywriters in the world, like to get people to go and buy the magazine, and like they're all short, so they all fit like the headlines for us. When you were talking about like description, headline, the hook, like,
yep.
Yeah, just something we can all look at to
absolutely
get better hook templates and stuff.
Yeah, and then with that, like I wanted to just stick with examples that we've been bringing up lately is results-driven messaging, right? So that goes into prioritizing the hook, and we know the headline that Alfie had come up with recently, so I just wanted to keep it fresh and front and center. Transform your look in just 10 minutes a day, right? So when we break that down, the front end of that hook and that headline is X result. In Y, right? So the product is
demonstrating the specific audience as well. The trans
100%. Yeah. So that result has to resonate and be something that specific audience wants to back you up there.
I just was curious, and we could talk more about this, Alfie, on our call tomorrow. Actually, I can't believe it's actually Wednesday already. I'm curious as to how you do some of your research, right? Like you just brought up magazines, some of the best copywriters in the world formalize those headlines and stuff like that. So I'm just curious as to how you would go about doing some of your research, because 2 brains is better than 1, right? So we can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk into more detail like on the call tomorrow. But like, just, I don't know, it's just being a student, right? And being like, it's just like being obsessed. Like, I guess, like you just read it all the time, like just have a massive swipe file and learning everything you can, really. And like,
yeah,
a really good place you could go look, and a place that I look all the time is I always look at native ads. So like I'll go to like weatherchannel.com, for example, and that's where Taboola has a lot of their native ad placements, and I just read the headlines. That's like newspaper 101, right? Is that like the headline needs to sell the story, right? And like, so I came from a journalism background. That's why it's really easy for me to write these hooks and these headlines, because I've done, I don't even know, tens of thousands of them. I could even be more at this point. I'm not sure. But like, if you think of newspaper writing, that headline, the goal of that headline was to give people an idea of what the story was about, so much that it would compel them to read the article. And that's what the headline is, right? And so you could go look at just look at like NewYorkTimes.com, CNN.com, WeatherChannel.com, anywhere that native Taboola ads show up, you'll see which offers have really compelling headlines, and it'll change the way that you look at copywriting for everybody, even as a media buyer.
I would agree with that massively.
Mhm.
Like, I get all my best ideas from like the native ads. People are like, when I first started looking at native ad headlines, I was like, people don't actually click on these, do they? Like, they do.
Yeah.
Another place I'd go, like Tristan, is swipes.co, because it's got like a shit. That's basically like a shit ton of like old school swipes, new school. Like, there's loads of stuff in there, and as boring as it sounds, copying out headlines by hand and copying out bullets by hand as well. That's stuff I've done religiously. So
yeah, absolutely, man. I'd love to get all those resources.
And I just landed on a headline writing template recently too. I just have to like reformat it and sort of add some things to it.
So I've actually I've taken what I got from my last, well, he was the co-founder that was there originally and then he left, but it's like his full process, very similar to what we do in the with the sales framework, but I just put that in a document form, and then I'm just trying to have that like visually so I can see it a little bit better, right? And then comparing that with what the client has wrote in the dossier with what we have. And then I also want to add in like all of these resources too, just to have it more structured in a process like the winning ad formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just boom, 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 rinse and repeat. This is what we do every single client. Here's how we follow it. And because that's one of the weak points, at least on my end right now. And I think if we all have access to that, we can just continue adding to that. Hey, saw this great Amazon review, right? Saw this great headline here, and just have a full master document for each client internally. I think that would be a gold mine.
Yep.
Once we start to scale. So.
Yep, absolutely. That's most of what I had prepared for you guys today. So I'm going to be adding this into our master media buying SOP. I really hope that you'll start using and working from this framework as a guide. On our Tuesdays, I will be I always sort of consult or advise from these principles, but now you'll know as well, like, if for lack of better words, where you'll be graded from, right? Or like what are the frameworks, or what is the foundation that you can work from? It's right here for you guys. And so remember, this is here to help you be successful. This is not here to like babysit you or, to be hard on you. Like, this is a framework for success. So look at it from that side of things versus like another thing to follow or something like that. 'Cause trust me, like, I wouldn't have been able to manage the levels of spend that I've managed if I didn't do these things. So I'm just wanting to share them with you as well so that we can all thrive and be successful together.
Awesome.
Yep.
Can you share that with me directly? You said you're putting that in a...
Yeah, I'll be adding it to the updated SOP doc, and I'll reshare it with everybody.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Does anybody have any questions?